Welcome to the Lippis Report.
Hello everyone, I'm Nick Lippis and I'm here at CiscoLive with Steve Shalita, who's the Vice President of Marketing at NetScout. So Steve, great to see you here today.
Good to see you, Nick.
Awesome, great. Well, we're going to have a little fireside chat. So I have a couple of questions that I wanted to ask Steve to get his perspective on NetScout, the Cisco ecosystem, and how they all participate in it, and also some major changes that are happening in the industry and get his response to those. So first, Steve, can you tell our viewers what NetScout really does and how you fit into the overall Cisco ecosystem?
Sure. NetScout's focused on performance management. Our real focus for really the history of the company is how are networks and applications and users experiencing services over the network. So really the key has been performance, traffic measurement, network intelligence, what we're doing there from a technology perspective. Right. We've had a long-standing relationship with Cisco, and we have a number of different integrations and ecosystem relationships across the Cisco environment. Everything from integrating our analysis technology, our appliance technology into the Cisco ISR and the ISR G2 technology. We have integration into the wireless environment with the location controller capabilities in the wireless architecture. We're doing things on the unified communication side in certification for monitoring call managers and IP telephony and video deployments. Cisco's using our technology, our Ingenious Voice Video Manager technology for telepresence in their managed service telepresence offering. We have integration with the SourceFire security technologies and continue to expand in the Cisco environment. And most importantly, vast number of our deployments really are across Cisco infrastructure. Cisco's a very significant part of our customer networks, and so we have a tremendous amount of focus within the Cisco environment and really looking to address the new technologies as they're coming out.
Great, wow, it seems like clearly large portfolio of value add into like the Cisco ecosystem, as well. So great. So I want to shift our discussion a little bit. So networks have evolved significantly, and the delivery of applications and the services have become more complicated, and we've talked about that a little bit off camera before. So the question is, how can organizations optimize service delivery? So if we can talk about like the three key things, that's people, process, and technology,
right? That
would be really helpful.
I mean, people, process, and technology is the key to all of the IT world, and we're seeing huge shifts there from a process perspective, right? Sure. But if we think people, the biggest challenge I think that IT organizations are facing today is skill gaps. How do you evolve to deal with this ever-changing, rapidly changing technology landscape, right? And how are you going to be able to allow your people to be able to deal with broader technology bases? We see that happening on the unified communication side, right? As we bring in voice over IP and video technologies, the expertise isn't there, right? We're used to regular PBXs. As applications become more sophisticated, and what this has kind of led to is a silo environment within the IT organization. Groups are focused on individual pieces of technology, and you just have these massive skill gaps that create challenges to solve the problem. So you put process in place to improve performance, right? And within the idle process, as an example, is one way to define that, but the skill gaps is extremely difficult. The next issue is the tools that are actually used, or the technology that's put in place to allow you to support the people in process. And so much of that's being deployed in today's IT shops is supporting the siloism, supporting those individual views, as opposed to focusing on collaboration. For a long time, the IT organization is really focused on enhancing collaboration for the organization rather than themselves. And what we see here is a shift of really moving to bringing together, interlocking people, process, and technology into a much more productive way.
Yeah, that's very good. Really, it's kind of like the old world is siloed. The new world really is a collaborative IT delivery organizational model.
Right, and even within the network, it's been. I was at Interop a couple of weeks ago, standing outside. I heard a guy talking on the phone. Apparently, he had a real problem back in their organization. But he's talking to this other guy, and he says, "Oh no, that's the WAN guy. He can't touch the LAN." Right. I mean, that's how most organizations operate.
Yeah, it's too bad too, because it elongates the problems.
Exactly. You end up with ping pong of whose problem is it, and you're each defending the honor of your particular domain.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then, why has end user experience become such a high priority metric for lots of different organizations?
Well, I think this comes to the people process technology piece, and that is, how do you define success? In today's IT environment, certainly there's service level agreements and different levels of performance that you need to deliver to the business as IT organization, right? IT is a service, and how are you enabling the business? But more and more organizations are looking to user experience as that ultimate metric of application success, of new application rollout. Definitive, is this successful? Is it working? Is it enabling more productivity? So user experience has become the new SLA, if you will, because you're measuring in bits and bytes. What, you're going to look at response time? Some of that's reasonably ambiguous. Are the users productive? Are the users complaining, or are the users happy? That's ultimately become a measure of success.
Yeah, I think it's almost like the queue at the help desk. Is that really short or is it really long?
Right. In some ways, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then, how should organizations define user experience, and also then how do you measure that as well?
Well, the key is to get to all of the interactions. How you measure that is ultimately, are you meeting availability, quality, and performance levels that supports the business environment? And it's going to be different within each group within the IT organization, right? Someone who's customer facing, that's revenue focused. Are they able to take the orders, do the inputs, have access to the systems, use the telephone system normally without impeding their ability to support customers, take orders, average working time? But ultimately that user experience becomes a metric of, is it number of complaints? Is it how many calls to the help desk? Is it user satisfaction? Is it productivity? How you measure that really requires a holistic view of the interaction between the application, the networks, all of the enabling technology, and ultimately what the user's doing. See, things like BYOD, mobility, all of that changes the landscape in today's enterprise IT world. Users expect performance, expect access to be consistent, whether they're on campus, off campus, wired, wireless, remote, doesn't matter. And so looking at that user experience and looking at it from a network transaction perspective, right, from the intelligence you can get from the network, becomes an extremely flexible, valuable way to do that, and also allow you to give much more meaningful metrics to senior management.
Right. Okay, great. So it really kind of leverage the network, all the value that the network has in terms of it's the focal point for all traffic flows and all application flows, and kind of now start to kind of harness that and utilize that in order to provide some metrics so you can communicate both the executive management and also to measure yourself on how you're basically doing against user experience. Okay. So then what can organizations do to improve the success of rolling out like a new service, such as an application or a cloud service or a converged unified communication service? So let's kind of like brass tacks.
I mean, I think service rollout is one of the most critical aspects of the IT life, right? Bringing out a new service, and it's success or fail in many cases. And there's a lot of projects that have gotten hung up in the rollout stage. Really, we got to think about all the way into the genesis of a new service or an application. Applications themselves are built by people that are not necessarily focused on the application, how it's going to behave on the network. They always say application developers don't always build network-friendly applications, right? So we've got to start in how we build it, what's happening in DevOps. But as you start bringing that in production, the way in which you look at traffic, at performance, at interactions, completely changes than what you're doing in the development cycle. So you need to start looking at as a production environment at that rollout stage, and that's where real-time monitoring, real-time performance management becomes key. And just like you're looking at a production deployment, as you're rolling it out, you want to have visibility into what's happening in the application, in the data center, in the infrastructure, through the network, and how the user's consuming it. And ultimately, you want to be able to see performance differences by types of devices. Is a user getting a different experience on a desktop, laptop versus a tablet versus a mobile device, on-premise, off-premise? So that critical point of when you're starting to trial and move it into production is where your monitoring strategy should really be implemented. Most people, they wait till the end when they have problems and it's a disaster and the CIO's screaming, the users are screaming. That's when they typically start looking at, oh, well, maybe we should put in some performance monitoring to figure out what the problem is. Starting right from the beginning makes a huge difference.
Yeah, well, that's great. So really from the very early stages of the life cycle of deployment, getting the application in, yeah, you're right, because it's usually like, something's wrong, we don't know how to fix it, let's go get some tools.
Exactly. I mean, our sales guys get their biggest calls. Hey, we rolled this out and it's not working right. We got huge problems. We need your help now. Yeah. At that point, you're already behind the 8 ball. Being there from the beginning will ensure a much smoother rollout.
Yeah, your reputation's already damaged.
That's right.
When you're making that phone call. That's right. So then, why should the network care about application performance? Isn't that the application team's responsibility? So there always is this yin-yang between application folks and the networking folks. So it'd be great to kind of like actually allow them to collaborate.
It's that silo challenge, right? You've got this issue with, well, that's the app guy's domain, and they got the servers, and I got the network. And network guys have been challenged over the past few years in their relevancy, right? Budgets have shifted. Budgets have moved to the application team. Application teams are building these new things. Well, the network's just the plumbing, right? The network is far more important than that. And with things like SDN and other things, the network's going to continue to change. I think that IT needs to look at things in a much more holistic, unified way. And I think that caring about application performance for the network team is important not only to the business, because you're going to help the organization more effectively, and I'll come back to that, but it's also going to help you from a career and relevance perspective, because you're going to be looking at the lifeblood that your network is carrying over that environment, right? So it's going to improve the overall role that you play in IT. We see this new role emerging in IT organizations called the Service Delivery Manager, and they're responsible for kind of overarching how do services get out to the users. And we see a lot of networking people taking that role as opposed to application people. So it becomes really important. But the other reason is the network is the foundation. As Cisco has said, the network is the platform, right? And it's the piece that connects all of this together. So it allows you to really become valuable to the IT organization, but to the rest of the organization as well.
Yeah, very good. So you mentioned software-defined networking just very, very briefly there. We know that that's coming. We know that also network service virtualization is coming as well. So we have these transitions happening. They're kind of in pilots, and it seems to me is that NetScout's role is in helping companies go from pilots towards how do you operationalize that. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that transition that's happening in the marketplace and how you see it fitting into like NetScout?
Sure. I mean, I think network virtualization, which is this broad umbrella, right? You talk about that a lot. Software-defined networking, network function virtualization, all of those things are going to make big changes in how networks are deployed, how they're provisioned and operated, and ultimately how you manage and monitor from a performance perspective. And I think that the networking guys need to think differently today as they start building those multi-tier environments. There's talk from an SDN perspective, with SDN, you won't need performance management anymore. You won't need monitoring anymore because we'll give you the information that you need from this software-defined environment. And the issue with that is it's still going to be very focused on the control plane between the controller and the cluster device. And yeah, it's going to give you metrics like NetFlow, like log files, like other things, but it's not going to give you this holistic, unified interdependency perspective that you really need to understand and manage performance. So I think that SDN, as that becomes more of a reality, the IT organization, the networking guys in particular, are going to need more of a correlated multi-tier overlay, underlay, middle tier network view that they can understand how all of these pieces work together, because SDN essentially represents another layer of enablement that's added to the network, and that means another layer of where something can go wrong that's going to affect performance.
Very good point. Excellent. Well, let's see. Most of what we've discussed is relevant for enterprise organizations. All right. So how are things different maybe for service provider deployments?
Well, that's an interesting question because there's a lot of similarities in the technology for service provider environments, but they're very different, not only in scale, in size, right? So where an enterprise might deal with millions of transactions a day, a typical mobile operator is dealing with billions of transactions an hour. They're focused on service assurance, a little bit different than performance management, but fundamentally same thing. We're looking at application performance or service performance, network performance, a lot of signaling and pieces in there. But you see things like customer experience management, which is really data analytics, which is moving into a broader way of extracting business intelligence from the network, taking hold in the service provider space. So while NetScout's widely deployed in service provider as well, with over 160 global service providers, a pretty substantial footprint. Every mobile operator in North America is using our technology in their networks in the US and Canada, across Europe, Asia, Latin America. So from a service provider perspective, similar kinds of issues, but at a much, much broader scale.
Yeah, and actually I think from an enterprise point of view, that should provide a degree of comfort because you're dealing with service provider scale. So you have the tools, the resources, the know-how to kind of like deal with really large scale. And on the enterprise marketplace, I'm not saying it's easy at all, but also it's great that that is in the DNA of NetScout.
Absolutely. Right, we started in the enterprise market, and that's where NetScout really built its base, and we learned scale in enterprise. Most of our enterprise deployments are very large, literally hundreds and hundreds of locations, thousands of applications running on the network with tens of thousands of users. We're in like 95% of the Fortune 100 networks. As we started getting pulled into service provider networks, as they moved to IP, right, we moved from their enterprise side into production, we thought we knew scale. We didn't. Right? We had to deal with massive scale requirements in that enterprise, in that service provider network. And so that's only strengthened what we can deliver to the enterprise. Today, NetScout is the most scalable platform from an IP perspective that services the service provider community in billions of transactions an hour, and that's brought huge value back to our enterprise customers.
Okay, great. So I just have like one final question.
Sure.
So how are the service providers leveraging big data analytics and really for operational and also business advantage? So, a lot of data out there, you're able to kind of bring it up, put it into analytics. So how are they taking advantage of that?
That's an excellent question, especially in the bridge of enterprise service provider, because I think what service providers are doing today is going to be relevant to the enterprise in the coming years, right? Enterprises today are using this technology to manage the network and applications. It's all speeds and feeds technical stuff, right? Latency, performance. What service providers are doing is leveraging network intelligence for business intelligence. What they're understanding is what services users are accessing, what devices they're using to access, what are their performance levels. So more and more service providers are turning to this network intelligence for service assurance to actually making business decisions. What services could I roll out to my user base based upon what they're accessing over HTTP or internet? What's their user experience on different services that I could potentially monetize for new services? How are different devices performing? What's the performance level between my data center, my app store partners, my mobile cloud environment, but more at a business level? So they're using it for reporting to understand trending and utilization, not at the deep technical level, what's my latency level or what's my performance metric, but what could I do to monetize this network? How can I stay ahead of the game and retain customers in the network? We're seeing that on the enterprise side with some of the web companies, right? So Career Builder talked about when we rolled out Ingenious One, how they're using it to monitor transactions and understand that user experience. You're just going to see that start to really take hold in enterprise, but it's huge on the service providers.
Yeah, that's great. And that's also added value for the enterprise marketplace as well. It's like we started off this whole discussion about user experience. And so like the service providers are using a lot of NetScout's technology to do big data analytics to basically assure that they're delivering good customer experience. And that should be leverageable right into the enterprise marketplace for user experience.
Right. And we'll introduce, our ASI technology is the foundation that does all of this analysis and creates all of the data that we're pulling up. But later this year, we'll introduce more and more customer experience, business intelligence analytics capabilities that will make that even easier than trying to extract it from a performance management service assurance tool to something that's more focused on that.
Awesome. Great. Very good. Well, I've been talking with Steve Shalita from NetScout, who's the Vice President of Marketing. Nice fireside chat over here at CiscoLive. Steve?
Thank you very much, Nick. Great to see you.
Welcome. Sam, likewise. Great to see you as well. Great. And thank you all so much for watching.
That concludes this edition of the Lippis Report. Thank you for joining us. Look for us every Tuesday and Thursday. To get your free subscription to the Lippis Report newsletter, go to www.lippisreport.com. To sponsor the Lippis Report podcast, send email to sales@lippis.com. We've got to go, and so do you. See you next time.